Immortal, peerless, beautiful beyond measure. From Middle-earth to the Elder Scrolls, to the dying stars of Warhammer, elves were meant to be the pinnacle of fantasy itself. Ancient magic, timeless kingdoms, wisdom gathered across thousands of years. They have everything humanity does not, and yet, in almost every fantasy universe, they are losing. Their empires are shattered, their cities stand empty. Their songs have turned from anthem of victory into the hymns of mourning. They are not vanishing overnight, but they are bleeding out, quietly fading into myth. And that raises a terrifying question. How does a race that can outlive mountains still run out of time? Hello adventurer, I am LuciferCodeZero, and today we uncover why elves, despite their all beauty and wisdom, were never meant to survive the future, and the great lie of immortality itself. Elves are almost always presented as the peak of civilization. At first glance, immortality sounds like an ultimate gift, but hidden inside the gift is a terrible consequence. The loss of urgency. Humans innovate because mortality forces movement. A human king may have 30 years to secure his realm. An inventor has one fleeting lifetime to leave a mark. Entire generations rises and vanish, bringing new ideas, new ambitions, and new catastrophes. But do not mistake Elven caution for simple stagnation. That is a human judgment. We look at the immortal civilization spending 500 years perfecting a single magical theorem, and we call it frozen. But by their own measure, they are operating on a time scale that makes human progress look like a children playing with fire. And to be fair, human progress often is fire. Humans forget quickly, and that allows us to recover, rebuild, and try again. But that forgetfulness is horrifying. We forget the ashes of empire only to build the next one. We forget the devastation of war only to forge deadlier weapons. Humanity invents black powder and steam engines within the handful of generations, yes, but we unleash them alongside industrial slaughter and mass destruction. Humans optimize for velocity, elves optimize for memory. They remember everything, and elves' caution does not come from fear, it's come from experience. They have watched entire kingdom fall to reckless magic before. Elves prioritize preservation over expansion because they have personally witnessed what unchecked ambition produced. They are not failing at the human game of progress. They look at the board, saw the devastation waiting at the end, and they simply choose to stop playing. But here lies the tragedy. The human path leads to breathtaking progress and breathtaking catastrophe. The elf path leads to magnificent, unchanging beauty and a quiet, creeping spiritual death. Because no matter how perfectly you preserve the past, the world keeps turning without you. We must now confront the brutal truth of human tide. It is not merely the human breed faster or recover quicker. It is that humanity is an engine of assimilation. When elves encounter new ideas, their caution and perfection make change painfully slow. Humans are the opposite. We absorb everything: magic, architecture, philosophy, culture. Humanity takes ancient knowledge and weaponize it with terrifying speed, and that leads to reality far darker than the simple death of magic. Because in many fantasy worlds, humanity does not destroy magic, we industrialize it. Sacred elven arts become tool of mass production. Forbidden space become artillery. Ancient pacts become fuel for necromantic factories. Magic does not despair, it loses its beauty, polluted by the mortal ambition, and perhaps that is the true tragedy of elves. Not watching magic fade, but watching their most sacred wonders stripped apart and repurposed into engines of catastrophe. And then there is quite tragedy of the half-elf. At first glance, half-elves seem like a proof that elven blood is simply fading away. But the truth is far more painful than that. Many half-elves actively choose humanity. Why? Because for all its recklessness, humanity offers movement, purpose, change, and vitality. The immortal elven enclave may be beautiful, but they are also suffocating, perfectly preserved worlds where nothing truly changes anymore. And so the tragedy becomes complete. The elder race is not merely losing a demographic war, they are losing their most curious, ambitious, and adventurous descendants to the chaotic movement of mankind. It is the ultimate rejection. Their own children began looking up the immortal perfection and deciding they would rather burn brightly and briefly in the mortal world instead. But this choice of preservation over progression is not merely philosophical. It is driven by something colder: demographics. Elves do not simply choose caution. They are forced into it by the weight of their own biology. Their populations are stable and often declining. When a human falls into battle, they are mourned, yes, but humanity recovers quickly. We can spend lives like a grim currency, on battlefields, on dangerous experiments, on reckless innovation. For an elf, there is no such luxury. Every elven life is an archive, a living vault of memory, skill and history, and when that life is lost, centuries vanish with it. The death of even a handful of elves is not merely a tragedy, it is a civilizational wound, one that takes centuries to heal. That is why Elven caution is not weakness, it is survival, and this is where human recklessness becomes our most terrifying advantage: adaptability. An elf may possess a sword technique refined to flawless perfection over 2000 years, but a human gunsmith can invent a crude weapon that makes that mastery obsolete in 50. Elves remember how to defeat the last great threat. Humanity invents entirely new threats and new solutions faster than immortal memory can adopt. And from this comes the quiet spiritual death of perfection. When nothing changes, when every risk is avoided, when every tradition is preserved, what's remained to strive for? Their art become refinement of the old forms. Their romance become echo of ancient epics. Even their titles has the peak of civilization become hollow. When that peak now stands behind them, this is not stupidity. It is not laziness. It is not drama. They watched their golden age collapse. They watched friends, kingdom, entire era vanished. So they learned the most strangest lesson an immortal race can learn. Never risk too much. Never change too quickly. Never let the world wound you again. But the world does not stop moving. And eventually, no matter how flawless their architecture, how peerless their magic, or how deep their wisdom, elves become prisoner of their own perfection, gods ruling over magnificent garden, while the rest of universe leave them behind. We have painted the elves as tragic victims of wisdom, memory, and unforgiving biology. But not every wound comes from outside. Sometimes the prison is built from within. Sometimes elves are dying because pride itself becomes a gilded cage. And fantasy universes are ruthless. When it comes to punishing arrogance, when a race reaches the absolute peak of civilization, when there are no more enemies to conquer and no more mystery to unravel, no more struggle left to survive, what comes next? Hubris, and eventually self-destruction. World of Warcraft give us a perfect tragic case study. You see elves everywhere in Azeroth. They are beautiful, they are playable, and they are beloved. But look closely at their lore. They are not thriving people. They are shattered fragments. The Night Elves lost their immortality and their home. The High Elves were brought to the brinks of extinction. The Blood Elves survive only by enduring a desperate magical addiction. The Nightborne spent 10,000 years hiding behind the magical shield, terrified of outside world. In Azeroth, elves are defined by the catastrophe. We see this echoed across the great pillar of fantasy. The Elder Scrolls is soaked in Elven influence, and yet what do we explore? Their graves. The Ayleids collapse beneath the weight of their own cruelty. The Dwemer vanish completely because their technology, Hubris, dare to challenge the gods themselves. And then there is Warhammer 40k. Here the Elven tragedy reached its apocalyptic extreme. The Aeldari were once a galaxy-spanning civilization, terrifyingly advanced, practically immortal, utterly dominant. But when the civilization is freed from consequences, what remained? Boredom, excess, endless pursuit of sensation. Their pleasure become destructive. Their arrogance become cosmic. Their empire did not merely fall, it birthed a chaos god. Now they are scattered ghosts, hunting the ruins of their own perfection. And that is the ultimate tragic irony. The only thing capable of destroying a perfect immortal race was the crushing weight of their own perfection. So if elves are fading, if they are shattered, if they are ghosts sitting in the garden of universe has left behind, why do we still love them? Why do we long for them in our stories? Because their decline is precisely what makes them beautiful. They are what's remain when greatness outlives hope. They carry the crushing weight of memory with quiet heartbreaking grace. But there is something deeper here. We do not love elves only because they are sad or because they wield flawless magic. We love them because they remind us how to see the wonder again. J.R.R. Tolkien, the man who helped define the modern Elven tragedy, believed fantasy was not merely about escaping the real world. It was about returning to it with clear eyes. It's called this idea recovery. The ancient elf, the silent forest, the hidden kingdom beneath the stars. They are not only fantasies, they are reminders because when the story ends, when the book closes, when the game faded to black, you may look at the ordinary forest, an old rune, or a quiet evening sky and realize the magic was never entirely gone. You simply had to learn how to see it again. That is why elves endures, not because they rule the future, but because they preserve the wonder we keep forgetting. And perhaps that is their final gift to us. Even in fading, they teach us to cherish the magic that remains. But perhaps it goes even deeper than that. Why do we, as humans, keep writing this exact same tragedy across so many different fantasy worlds? Because we do not create elves to feel superior. We create them because we are terrified of ourselves, terrified of our own speed, our own ambition, our own endless hunger for progress. We use elves to mourn the things our civilization leaves behind, the ancient forests, the quiet movements, the sense of reverence we traded away for industry, conquest, and iron. They are not merely a fantasy race, they are the mythological embodiment of our lost innocence. So, why are elves always fading? Because their golden age become a memory they could not release. Because immortality turns change into agony. Because humanity drags the world relentlessly from myth into history. And because in the grand tapestry of fantasy, elves were never meant to inherit the future. Their legacy survives only in fragments, in forgotten runes, in ancient songs, in fading bloodlines, and in the recovered wonder they leave behind. Orcs command respect because they endure through raw, unbreakable strength. Humans inspire fear because they turn desperate ambition into conquest. But elves endure because they remind us that even the most beautiful things must one day fade. And perhaps that is why we love them so deeply. Because in their fading, they teach us to cherish the magic that still remains. And if you want to know much more about humanity itself in fantasy, check out Why Even Monsters Fear Humans right here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time, adventurer.